Hey everyone, I'm going to talk to you about promises. So let's start off by going to REPL.it so we can write some JavaScript. So let's just do a quick Google search for REPL.it. And it should be this first link right here. And we're going to search for JavaScript. And boom, we're all set to start writing some JavaScript. So you write your JavaScript in the left box here, you hit run, and then it'll execute and print out any results here on the right. Right, so start off by creating a variable. Let's call it money, and we'll set to 200. So you're gonna have $200 to start off with. And then we're gonna write our promise right here. So I'm just gonna write this out and explain it in a second. So it might not make much sense as I'm writing it out, but I promise I'll come back and explain what I'm doing. So we're gonna create a variable called by car, and we're gonna assign to it a new promise. So there's our promise object. Let's open that up. And inside this promise object, we're going to pass one function, which itself will hold two parameters, resolve and a reject. Let's open that up. And inside here, we're going to have two scenarios. So in the first one, if your money is greater than, let's say, $10,000, then we're going to, first of all, create a car object. And we'll make this, let's go with the Nissan, and the model, we'll make that a Micra, and then we'll just give it one more property. We'll give it a year, and we'll just make it 2015. So there's our object, and then we're gonna resolve, and we're gonna return our car. Just like that. So there's our one scenario. Then our other scenario, so our else, we're just gonna reject this promise, and we're just gonna return some text. So you do not have enough money. Perfect. So if we were to run this right now, nothing would happen. You get return undefined. But we have our promise here set up. So let's break down this promise. First of all, we're creating a promise here, this new keyword, which is just an object that gets passed one parameter, which is just this one function. So bare bones, broken down, our promise would look like this. So it would be const by car. It'll be new promise, just like that. Inside here, we have that one parameter that gets passed in. And the executor is the function that is passed into this new promise, and it gets executed immediately by the promise. And we are storing the results of our promise in a variable called by car, as you can see here. So it gets passed one function, and that function has two parameters, a resolve and a reject. So let's just get rid of this here for now. So in our case, we're creating a promise. We pass in the function, which must always have two parameters, resolve and a reject. So in this case, because our money is less than 10,000 here, it's 200. Our function here will run this here instead. Sorry, it won't run this here instead. Instead, it'll reject and we'll get this text returned to us. So, as you can see, our promise can have three states. Two states are apparent just by looking at the code. The promise can be resolved. So in this case, it would return our car if it was resolved. Or it can be rejected, in which case it just returns some text right here. Just says you do not have enough money. And during this time, there may be other processes that are determining how much money we have. But in this case, our promise will just be rejected quite quickly because we just declare a P that we have $200, quickly runs through this code and rejects the promise. So now the next step is to consume our promise. And to do that, we just type the name of our promise, followed by a .then, which gets passed another function. Takes that data that's returned, and we can just console.log that data. So we have success, and then we'll console.log the data. Otherwise, we'll catch any errors, pass a function, so we can pass the error, and we can do another console.log in here as well. And in this case, it's rejected. And we'll print out that error. Right, and let's run that. And you can see here our promise is rejected. You do not have enough money. So just to quickly run through that again. So we have our promise here. It's a new object, gets past this one parameter, which is a function. And this function itself has two parameters, resolve and reject. So in the first case, we check if the money is greater than 10,000. This is just an arbitrary number. You can make it anything. So if it's like greater than 500, then we're going to create this object and resolve, passing in that car object. And this is what gets returned or passed through into this then parameter through this function right here. So if we were to replace this with some text, like you have a car, and then give ourselves $600, then this will resolve and then we'll get passed, oops, should be data, success, and let's say you have a car. But in this case, we don't want to pass that text, we just want to pass that object we created. If we run that, success, and we have that object printed out for us. If we give ourselves 200, it'll reject, and this here inside these brackets will get passed through to this error parameter, and we print that out. So for money is 200, it'll get rejected, and we get this printed out for us instead. So in order to consume a promise, we must write out the name of our promise, followed by a .then, which holds a function that will get passed whatever is returned in our resolved method. And then the .catch will catch any errors, which will happen when our promise is rejected. And the parameter here will hold whatever gets passed through or returned from this reject method right here. And another thing is the order of the parameters in here matter as well. So if we were to switch them around and make reject happen first, we'll get some slightly silly behavior. So our money is 200 right now, so that means it should reject, and we should get this text returned, and we should get this logged here. So we should get rejected, followed by you do not have enough money. If we run that, we get success, you do not have enough money, which is kind of strange because it should be printing out rejected. So let's put that back into the proper order. So you have to make sure you have resolve first, followed by rejected to get your expected results. If we run that, we'll get the results we expected. So we get rejected, you do not have enough money. So one last thing before ending this video is that promises are asynchronous, and this means that they will not block your code from running while waiting for the promise to reject or resolve. So let's test that out by putting some console.logs in here. So we'll put one right before we buy a car. So console.log, let's just say before you buy the car, and then we'll just copy and paste that and put one right here. This is after you buy the car, or perhaps you don't buy the car if you don't have enough money. So we'll just say this before the buy car code. This is after the buy car code. Perfect. So this promise here will not block the code from running. So it's not going to go in this order. It's not going to print this out and then wait for this and then print this out. This will just keep running asynchronously while the rest of the code finishes doing what it needs to do. So if we run this, you see we get before the code, after the code, and then we get our promise rejected. So we can make this a bit more apparent by setting a timer here. So if we do set timeout and pass that a function, which will resolve. So let's add this here inside of our timer, just like that, and let's do 3 seconds. So what'll happen now, let's give ourselves enough money here. So what'll happen now is it'll try and resolve, but it won't do it right away. First it'll wait 3 seconds and then resolve. So let's run our code. You see we get before the code, after the code, and then we're waiting, and then we get our promise resolved. So you can see that we're not waiting for this code to finish. It's not blocking anything. these promises are asynchronous. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if you have any problems or any questions, and I'll do my best to answer those, and perhaps I'll follow up with another video that'll help explain promises even more. And that's it for today.